Min-jae Park stood in the center of the Seoul Central District Court, his cleaning mop still gripped tightly in his weathered hands as the entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. "I will protect you," he declared, his voice carrying a tremor of both terror and unwavering determination. His work-worn fingers clenched the wooden handle, if it were an anchor, keeping him from collapsing under the weight of what he was about to do. At the defendant's table sat Yoon Ji-woo, the infamous Korean mafia boss, whose own defense attorney had just walked out moments before the trial began, leaving her completely exposed. She lifted her gaze to meet his, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. None of them, not the prosecutors, not the packed gallery of journalists, not even Ji-woo herself could have imagined that this single moment would trigger the unraveling of one of the most intricate criminal conspiracies in Korean history. Before we dive deep into this gripping tale of justice, courage, and unexpected redemption, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you believe that everyone, whether a powerful mafia boss or a humble janitor, deserves fair treatment under the law. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to K-Mafia stories. Stories about hidden heroes like Min-jae deserve to be told, and you definitely don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's discover what drove a forgotten legal genius to rise against the very system that once destroyed his entire life. But before everything changed, what do you think pushed Min-jae, someone who had lost nearly everything, to step out from the shadows at that precise moment? The early morning sunlight of Seoul filtered through the towering windows of the district courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors that Min-jae Park had just finished mopping. 5 in the morning, just like every single day for the past 16 years. He was already there, a 47-year-old man with black hair, heavily streaked with grey and deep brown eyes that had seen too much. His navy maintenance uniform bore the simple label "Maintenance Staff" stitched above the chest pocket. The cramped studio apartment in Nawangu was still dark when he left at 4 in the morning. The tiny space contained only a narrow bed, a portable gas stove, and one bare wall decorated with a single photograph, his wedding picture with Hyejin from 18 years ago, before cancer stole away the woman he loved. Beside it hung a photo of their daughter, Soo-min, now 21 and in her final year at university, though in the frame she was only 6, smiling brightly in her mother's embrace. Min-jae never turned on the lights when leaving home. Winter electricity bills were brutal, and with a monthly salary of 3 million won, every single one mattered. Breakfast consisted of instant coffee, plain bread, and whatever food he could salvage from the courthouse basement cafeteria, small privilege granted to maintenance workers. That particular morning, as he pushed his cleaning cart down the 3rd-floor corridor, Min-jae paused outside Courtroom 302, what he privately considered the venue for the most significant cases. Today, one of the most explosive trials in Seoul's history was scheduled to begin. The prosecution of Yoon Ji-woo, the notorious mafia boss with an estimated fortune of 200 billion won. He hadn't learned about the case from television broadcasts. He didn't own a TV. Instead, he'd absorbed every detail during the countless nights he spent cleaning that very courtroom, watching the expensive lawyers, overhearing conversations they had when they thought no one important was listening. To them, the janitor was merely furniture, invisible, insignificant, unworthy of notice. But Min-jae Park hadn't always been invisible. 16 years ago, he had been a rising star at Kim and Associates, one of Seoul's most prestigious law firms. He'd had a spacious office overlooking the Han River, a reputation for never losing major cases, and a brilliant future stretching before him until everything came crashing down in a single catastrophic week. He forced those memories back into the locked box where he kept them. That was the past. Now he mopped floors, polished wooden benches, emptied trash bins. It was honest work that paid the rent and occasionally allowed him to send money to Soo-min, even though she always stubbornly refused to accept it. As Min-jae was about to wheel his cart away from the courtroom, his phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. "Park, room 300 needs another complete cleaning. VIP case today. Min-jae exhaled slowly. VIP meant pressure, inspections, and countless opportunities to be yelled at for the smallest imperfection. But as always, he didn't complain. By 9 in the morning, the courtroom was absolutely packed. Reporters squeezed into every available space. Lawyers adjusted their expensive ties. Keyboards clicked frantically as bloggers typed updates. At the defense table, Yoon Ji-woo sat completely alone. She was 39, but looked as though she carried the weight of entire criminal empires on her shoulders. Her once sharp black eyes now appeared clouded with exhaustion. Her designer Chanel suit was immaculate, yet her slightly hunched shoulders and tightly clasped hands betrayed the consuming tension. Next to her sat 7 empty chairs, the seats reserved for her legal team from Shin & Partners, the most expensive law firm in Seoul, charging 8 million won per hour. But they hadn't arrived. Min-jae glanced at the wall clock. 9:15. The trial would begin in 15 minutes. Ji-woo kept checking her phone, and each time she lowered it, her face grew paler. Min-jae knew with absolute certainty they weren't coming. They had abandoned her completely. All rise, the court officer announced. Judge Kim Sang-hoon entered, his expression stern, cold, and unreadable from decades of experience. He paused when his eyes landed on the empty chairs beside the defendant. "Miss Yoon, where is your legal representation?" Ji-woo stood, struggling to maintain her composure, but her voice trembled despite her efforts. "I don't know, Your Honor. They were here yesterday preparing. I'd been calling all morning, but no one is answering." Prosecutor Lee Jae-sung rose to his feet, a thin, triumphant smile playing across his lips. "Your Honor, it's abundantly clear the defense has been abandoned. We move for an immediate default judgment." The courtroom erupted into chaotic murmurs. Reporters typed frantically. Judge Kim sighed heavily. "If you have no legal representation, Miss Yoon, this court cannot delay proceedings indefinitely. I am therefore forced to. I will protect you." The strong, resonant voice cut through the noise like a blade. Everyone turned. Min-jae Park stood there beside his cleaning cart, the mop still clutched in his hand. The fluorescent lights reflected off his graying hair, and his face, lined by 16 years of grueling labor, was suddenly illuminated with fierce determination. Nervous laughter broke out first, soft and uncertain, then growing louder. But Min-jae didn't flinch. He carefully set the mop aside and walked steadily up the center aisle. To decades of mopping floors hadn't erased the posture of a lawyer who had once commanded courtrooms, just like this one. Judge Kim raised an eyebrow. "Who are you?" "My name is Park Min-jae, Your Honor. I wish to represent Miss Yoon." Prosecutor Lee let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "A janitor wants to play lawyer." Min-jae met his gaze without wavering. "I was a registered member of the Korean Bar Association for 19 years. A wave of shocked whispers swept across the courtroom. Min-jae reached into his worn wallet and produced his old attorney registration card, still technically valid. The judge examined it carefully, his expression shifting to something resembling surprise. "Mr. Park, how long has it been since you actively practiced law?" 16 years, Your Honor." The air in the courtroom grew even heavier. The judge continued. "And you believe you're still competent to defend someone in a case of this magnitude?" "Your Honor, this woman deserves proper defense. I know the law, I understand procedure, and I know what justice truly means." Ji-woo stood slowly. She looked into his eyes, not seeing desperation or personal ambition, but something she hadn't encountered in years, genuine sincerity, the kind that an 8 million won per hour legal team could never offer. "Yes, Your Honor," she said clearly. "I accept Mr. Park, my counsel." The courtroom exploded into chaos. Judge Kim rubbed his temples wearily. "You have 15 minutes to confer with your client, Mr. Park, and please do not delay these proceedings any further." Min-jae approached the defense table, only to be immediately blocked by a security guard. "Sorry, only authorized attorneys allowed in this area." Min-jae held up his registration card. The judge nodded confirmation. The guard stepped aside awkwardly. When Min-jae sat down beside Ji-woo, he felt every pair of eyes in the courtroom fixed on them, but he looked only at her. "Something is very wrong here," he whispered urgently. "This isn't simply about your lawyers abandoning you. Everything has been orchestrated." Ji-woo whispered back. "How can you possibly know that?" "Because I've observed thousands of cases over the past 16 years from these very floors. This one doesn't follow natural patterns." "Then who's behind it?" "We'll find out. But first, I need to hear everything from you." Ji-woo looked at him, this man she had walked past hundreds of times without ever truly seeing. The man who stood up for her when everyone else had turned away. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found exactly the right person. 15 minutes passed like 15 seconds. Ji-woo spoke rapidly, almost without pausing, trying to compress 3 months of complex legal preparation into an emergency briefing. She explained her legitimate business empire, a chain of high-end nightclubs and entertainment venues that operated entirely within legal boundaries, generating billions in annual revenue. She described how her reputation as a mafia boss stemmed from her family background and her refusal to bow to corrupt officials, not from actual criminal activity. She told him about the Choi Syndicate, the rival organization accusing her of orchestrating the murder of their former leader, Park Tae-min. She detailed the 3 months of absolute hell since the charges were filed, assets frozen, business partners fleeing, the media painting her as a monster. Min-jae listened without taking a single note. He didn't just hear the words, he absorbed every pause, every moment when her voice caught, every subtle hesitation. His deep brown eyes never left Ji-woo's face. She realized he was doing more than listening to content. He was reading her, the tension in her voice, the hesitation when mentioning certain people, the absolute certainty when she spoke about her innocence. "Time's up," the clerk announced. Judge Kim struck his gavel. "Mr. Park, prepare to deliver your opening statement." Min-jae rose and walked to the podium. He felt the crushing weight of every gaze in the room, some skeptical, some curious, many openly condescending. How many years had it been since he last stood in this position? How many nights had he lain awake in his cramped Now-and-Go apartment, dreaming of a moment like this, only to wake again with a mop in his hands? He placed both hands on the smooth wooden podium, drew a deep breath, lifted his head, and looked directly at the 12 faces in the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice calm and clear despite his racing heart. "My name is Park Min-jae. First, I must apologize for my appearance. I'm not wearing an expensive imported suit like my colleague at the prosecution table. I don't have a prestigious office or a team of assistants. Less than 1 hour ago, I was still mopping the floors of this very courtroom." Soft, uncertain laughter rippled through the back rows. Min-jae heard it clearly, but didn't falter. "But for 16 years, I have stood in this room every single day, watching justice unfold. I have seen truth triumph, and I have seen truth brutally buried. I've learned that justice doesn't depend on the price of your suit or the reputation of the law firm you hire. It rests on something far simpler, the truth." He paused, letting the words settle like dust in sunlight. "And the truth in this case is straightforward. Yoon Ji-woo did not murder anyone. She built a successful business through her own intelligence, hard work, and determination. Meanwhile, those who truly committed this crime are using our legal system as a weapon to eliminate their competition." Prosecutor Lee shot to his feet. "Objection. He's arguing conclusions, not presenting an opening statement." "Sustained," Judge Kim said. "Mr. Park, confine your remarks to what you intend to prove." Min-jae nodded respectfully. "My apologies, Your Honor. I will let the evidence speak for itself. And I promise you this: by the end of this trial, it will be unmistakably clear who is telling the truth and who is constructing elaborate lies." He sat down. It wasn't a polished opening, nor was it filled with impressive rhetoric, but it was genuine. And from the quiet, thoughtful nods of several jury members, Min-jae knew at least some of them were truly listening. Prosecutor Lee stood for his opening statement, tall and confident, walking to the podium if it were his personal stage. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice smooth as expensive whiskey. This case is not nearly as complicated as the defense wants you to believe. It is extremely simple murder. He walks slowly, his calculated gaze sweeping across every face. Yoon Ji-woo ordered the execution of Park Tae-min, the former leader of a rival organization, to expand her criminal empire. She used her extensive network of loyal operatives to carry out this assassination, then systematically eliminated every witness who could connect her to the crime. Lee paused, letting the accusation hang heavily in the air. We will prove this with forensic evidence, witness testimony from her own former associates, and documented communications that clearly show her involvement. By the end of this trial, there will be no doubt Yoon Ji-woo is a murderer, and murderers must face justice. He sat down with the absolute confidence of someone who believed victory was already guaranteed. The rest of the morning passed like a surreal nightmare. The prosecution called its first witness, a supposed forensics expert who claimed ballistics evidence definitively linked the murder weapon to Ji-woo's organization. When it came time for cross-examination, Min-jae stood, feeling every muscle in his body tense with nervous energy. 16 years since he'd last done this. 16 years since he'd stood before a witness, carefully peeling back layers of testimony, searching for the smallest inconsistencies to unravel the larger deception. But when he opened his mouth, something extraordinary happened. The words returned naturally, flowing as if he'd never stopped practicing. Questions built upon each other logically, methodically. He guided the witness through technical details, forced him to explain contradictory timelines, exposed gaps in the chain of custody for evidence. As the contradictions began to emerge, Min-jae felt something awaken inside him, something he'd buried for 16 long years. The lawyer he used to be. By the end of the day's session, Judge Kim looked at Min-jae with a markedly different expression, one carrying a hint of genuine, if reluctant, respect. Mr. Park, the judge said, you might want to acquire a proper suit before tomorrow's session. Min-jae nodded. I'll take care of it, Your Honor. But as he left the courtroom, he knew the harsh truth. He couldn't afford a new suit. The only suit he owned had been mouldering in his closet for over a decade, and now hung loosely on his frame. After years of physical labor, G-woo caught up to him the marble hallway outside. Mr. Park, she called. He turned. This time, he looked at her not as a high-profile defendant, not as the infamous mafia boss from news reports, but as a human being desperately clinging to her final thread of hope. She was taller than he'd expected, carrying herself with the confident posture that wealth and power created. But in those sharp black eyes, he saw something no amount of money could hide: genuine fear. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't understand why you're doing this, but thank you. Min-jae shook his head. Don't thank me yet. We've barely begun, and we need to talk seriously. I need to examine every document related to this case: emails, phone records, business contracts, everything. If we're going to fight properly, I need to know absolutely everything. Ji-woo nodded. Come to my residence tonight. I keep copies of everything there. I can't, Min-jae replied. I have my maintenance shift tonight. Ji-woo frowned in confusion. A shift? But you're my attorney. And I'm also a janitor who needs to pay rent, Min-jae said calmly. The court isn't paying me to defend you, Miss Yoon. This is pro bono work, completely free, which means I still need my job if I don't want to end up homeless. For the first time, Ji-woo truly understood the vast distance between their worlds. For her, paying lawyers 8 million won per hour had once felt normal, routine. For this man, missing a single shift could mean not having enough money for basic necessities. I'll pay you, she said immediately. Whatever your rate is. No, Min-jae interrupted firmly. If this were about money, I wouldn't have stood up today. I'm not doing this for prestige or compensation. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. He paused, then added more gently, but I'll come after my shift ends. Is midnight too late? Midnight is perfect, Ji-woo said. And somewhere deep inside both of them, they understood the real battle had only just begun. At midnight, Min-jae parked his ancient Hyundai outside the gates of Ji-woo's Gangnam mansion. Still wearing his janitor uniform, that carried the sharp scent of industrial cleaning chemicals from his 8-hour shift. He hadn't had time to return home and change, and the evidence showed in every sweat stain, darkening his shoulders. The security guard at the gate had been instructed to expect him, but the way the man stared at Min-jae's battered car said everything. He didn't belong in this world. As he entered through the main entrance, another security officer escorted him not to assist, but to ensure he didn't wander into restricted areas of the mansion. Ji-woo was waiting in her private study, still wearing the suit from court, though she'd removed the jacket. She looked exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't possibly fix. "Coffee?" she asked. Min-jae nodded. He needed the caffeine desperately. She poured from an espresso machine that probably cost more than his entire month's rent. The flavor was rich, smooth, completely unlike the instant coffee he drank every morning. "All right," Min-jae set down the delicate cup. "Tell me the real story. Not the version you told your expensive lawyers. Not the version for the media. The complete truth." Ji-woo sat down, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup. If it held answers she'd been too afraid to confront. "I inherited my father's organization 8 years ago," she began, her voice softening as painful memories surfaced. "Back then, I was just 29, fresh out of business school, and everyone told me I would fail. A woman couldn't possibly control what my father had built, they said. The other families would devour me within months." Ji-woo's eyes briefly lit up when she talked about those early struggles, the first time Min-jae saw the real woman beneath the armor of wealth and notoriety. "But I had a vision. I wanted to transform everything into legitimate businesses. My father's generation operated in shadows, relied on violence and intimidation. I wanted something different: upscale entertainment venues, luxury restaurants, real estate developments, all legal, all transparent, all paying proper taxes." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "The old guard families called me naive." Park Tae-min, the man I'm accused of murdering, was the loudest critic. He said I was destroying tradition, weakening our position. But I was succeeding. Within 5 years, my businesses were generating more profit than the old criminal operations ever did. "But you proved them wrong," Min-jae said. Ji-woo nodded slowly. 7 years building everything legitimately, living on stress and 4 hours of sleep per night. No criminal activity, just hard, honest business work. But my reputation, my father's legacy, it all followed me like a shadow." She stood, walked to a hidden safe behind a painting of mountains, and pulled out a thick folder. "Here." She handed it to him. "Complete financial records for the past 8 years. Bank statements, tax returns, business licenses, everything. Proof that I've operated entirely within the law since taking over." Min-jae opened the folder. Inside were hundreds of pages of documents, meticulous, detailed, undeniable evidence of legitimate business operations. "Why didn't your previous lawyers present this?" he asked, his jaw tightening. "They said it wasn't relevant," Ji-woo replied, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "They said they had a better strategy, focusing on discrediting prosecution witnesses." Min-jae snapped the folder shut, his expression darkening. "Not presenting your most critical evidence isn't strategy. It's deliberate sabotage." Ji-woo's face went pale. "You mean?" "I mean your lawyers were paid to lose," Min-jae said bluntly. "The only question now, who paid them? They worked until 4 in the morning, examining every email, every business contract, every piece of correspondence. The deeper they dug, the clearer the pattern became. Crucial evidence systematically ignored. Key witnesses never called to testify. Legal objections made at completely wrong moments. A defense strategy that seemed almost intentionally designed to fail. Ji-woo's former legal team wasn't incompetent. They were actively destroying her defense from within. "Is there anything else you haven't told me?" Min-jae asked. "Anything strange that happened in recent months?" Ji-woo hesitated. "There is one thing. Kang Min-ho, my head of security for the past 6 years. 3 weeks ago, I caught him copying files onto an external drive." Min-jae's eyes narrowed sharply. "And you didn't question him immediately?" "I trusted him completely," Ji-woo said. "Min-ho saved my life twice. I thought maybe he was just backing up security footage for his records. In cases like this, Min-jae said slowly. Nothing is accidental. If he copied data, someone paid him to do it. He looked at Ji-woo intently. Tomorrow in court, no matter what I say or ask, you must not react. No surprise, no corrections, no contradictions. Everything I do is part of the strategy. Why? Because we're being watched, Min-jae replied. Maybe not in this exact moment, but somewhere, somehow. And we have to assume every plan we make, the enemy already knows about. A chill ran down Ji-woo's spine. You've experienced this before, haven't you? Min-jae was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, very softly, 16 years ago, I took on a case against Daein Construction Corporation. A construction worker was blowing the whistle about deliberately weakened structural materials. 4 workers died when a building partially collapsed. I had overwhelming evidence, engineering reports, internal memos, everything. Ji-woo held her breath. Min-jae continued, his voice hollow. But before the trial, the evidence vanished from my office, all of it. They claimed I fabricated everything, forged documents to extort the company. I was suspended from the bar, then permanently disbarred. It took me 5 years to prove my innocence, 5 years working as a janitor, 5 years watching my daughter grow up without her father truly present in her life. They destroyed you, Ji-woo whispered. They tried, Min-jae corrected quietly. But they couldn't take the one thing that truly mattered, my knowledge of the law. And that's something they'll never take from you either. When Min-jae finally left at 5 in the morning, the sky was still dark, bruised with the last remnants of night. Ji-woo stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the red glow of his taillights fade down the long driveway. It wasn't the first time she'd felt alone in this fight, but for the first time in months, standing there in that darkness, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The next morning, Min-jae walked into the courthouse wearing a suit he'd purchased from a second-hand shop the night before. It wasn't new, wasn't expensive, but it was clean, pressed, and presentable. 40,000 won he could barely afford. But Judge Kim had been right today. He needed to look like a real attorney, not a janitor playing dress-up. The courtroom was absolutely packed. The story of the janitor-turned-lawyer had spread across Seoul like wildfire, and reporters crammed into every available space. When Min-jae entered, a few people actually applauded, hesitant, uncertain, torn between genuine admiration and mocking amusement. He ignored all of it. He focused on the only thing that mattered, uncovering the truth. Prosecutor Lee was ready, wearing a deep charcoal suit, shoulders squared, eyes sharp with confidence, the look of someone who believed the verdict was already decided. The prosecution calls Dr. Hon Seung-woo. Lee announced. Dr. Hon stepped onto the witness stand, the man in his mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, carrying the polished authority of an expert witness. For nearly 20 minutes, Prosecutor Lee guided him through testimony, claiming he had conducted the ballistics analysis that definitively linked the murder weapon to Ji-woo's organization. Min-jae sat perfectly still, taking notes, his expression carefully neutral, but inside, his mind was working furiously, assembling the puzzle pieces, identifying the inconsistencies, finding the weak points in the testimony. None of it aligned properly. When his turn came, Min-jae rose slowly. He carried a single thin folder, walking to the lectern with such steady calmness that it seemed to silence the entire courtroom. Dr. Hon, he began, his voice gentle, but impossibly firm. You testified that you personally conducted the ballistics analysis on the murder weapon between March 5th and March 8th of this year. Is that correct? That's correct, Dr. Hon replied confidently. Then please help me understand something. Min-jae lifted the first document from his folder. This is your employment record with the National Forensic Service. Would you please read aloud your start date? Dr. Hon glanced down at the paper, and the color drained completely from his face. March 15th, he said, his voice suddenly much quieter. I'm sorry, Min-jae said softly. I didn't quite catch that. March 15th, he repeated louder, his voice now trembling noticeably. Min-jae turned to face the jury directly. So you could not have conducted any analysis between March 5th and 8th because you weren't yet employed, correct? A ripple of shocked whispers spread across the courtroom. Min-jae held up a second document. And here is the official forensic lab log. It shows the ballistics analysis was actually completed on March 7th, 8 days before you were hired, Dr. Han. Would you care to explain how you personally conducted analysis on evidence you couldn't possibly have accessed? Prosecutor Lee leapt to his feet. Objection. The defense did not provide this document during discovery. Your Honor, Min-jae said calmly. This came directly from the National Forensic Service's own records. If the prosecution failed to review publicly available evidence, that is not my responsibility. Objection overruled, Judge Kim said. Proceed. Mr. Park. Dr. Han's hands began shaking visibly on the witness stand. Min-jae fixed his gaze on him. Dr. Han, one final question. Did you receive a payment of 50 million won from a company called Shinhwa Consulting 2 weeks before agreeing to testify here today? Dr. Han froze completely. That was ... Yes or no, doctor. I was compensated for my time and expertise as an independent consultant. 50 million won for false testimony, Min-jae said, his voice sharp as a blade. That sounds less like consulting fees and more like a bribe. The courtroom erupted into absolute chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed continuously. Judge Kim pounded his gavel repeatedly. Your Honor, Min-jae said over the noise. I move to enter evidence of this transaction and request that this witness be charged with perjury. Gasps, shouts, furious typing. The courtroom felt like it had exploded. And for the first time since the trial began, Min-jae saw exactly what he'd been waiting for: genuine fear in the eyes of Prosecutor Lee. They had never expected that a janitor would know how to systematically tear their entire case apart. After the hearing concluded, Min-jae and Ji-woo stepped out of the courthouse into an absolute forest of cameras and microphones. Reporters shouted questions from every direction, camera flashes bursting like lightning strikes in a storm. Min-jae kept his head lowered, placing a protective hand lightly on Ji-woo's back, skillfully guiding her through the chaotic crowd. Only when the taxi door shut, blocking out the overwhelming noise, did Ji-woo finally breathe properly. How did you know about the payment to Dr. Han? She asked, still visibly shaken. Min-jae opened his old canvas briefcase, not expensive leather, but the cheap kind from discount stores. I didn't know for certain, he admitted calmly. But in cases like this, money always leaves traces. I made an educated guess, and his reaction confirmed everything. You bluffed. Ji-woo stared at him, genuinely surprised. Min-jae shrugged slightly. But after seeing his reaction, I had someone verify the details immediately. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. My daughter, Soo-min. She works in digital marketing, but her ability to find information online is remarkable. Ever since I told her about this case, she's been investigating everything. His phone buzzed. A new message from Soo-min. Dad, I found something major. Call me now. Min-jae looked up at Ji-woo. We need to meet my daughter immediately. An hour later, they sat in a small cafe in Naungwa, a space as foreign to Ji-woo as another planet. The cafe was cramped, plastic chairs squeaked loudly, and the smell of cheap instant coffee mixed with old frying oil. But most importantly, it was private. No reporters, no cameras, no lawyers watching. Park Soo-min walked in wearing jeans and a simple university hoodie, carrying an expensive laptop that seemed incongruous with her casual appearance. Min-jae stood up abruptly, awkward like a father uncertain whether he still had the right to embrace his daughter. Soo-min resolved it by stepping forward first, giving him a quick but genuine hug. She was 21, with long black hair and eyes, exactly like her father's, intelligent, determined, seeing more than most people realized. Dad, she said, then turned to Ji-woo. And you must be Yoon Ji-woo. I'm Soo-min. They shook hands. Ji-woo couldn't help noticing the contrast. Her own hand, softened by expensive lotions and spa treatments, meeting the practical, work-capable hand of a young woman who'd built her life through her own efforts. Soo-min opened her laptop immediately. Okay. At first I wasn't sure exactly what Dad wanted me to investigate, so I started with the Choice Syndicate, the organization accusing you of murder. She pulled up a series of documents. On the surface, they look like a standard organized crime family, but when I dug into their financial structure, things got strange. The Choice Syndicate is funded by a shell company registered in Hong Kong. That company is owned by another entity in Singapore, and that company ... She paused dramatically, is owned by Gangnam Corporation. Min-jae froze. Gangnam Corporation, he repeated quietly. You know them? Soo-min asked. Oh yes, Min-jae said, his voice hollow. They're the parent company of Daehan Construction, the corporation that destroyed my career 16 years ago. Soo-min stared at him, eyes widening. They had never truly discussed it openly what happened, who was behind it, how completely his life had been dismantled. It was them all along, she whispered. Ji-woo leaned forward intently. But why would a construction conglomerate care about eliminating me? At first I didn't understand either, Soo-min admitted. But then I read more about your legitimate businesses and your expansion plans. She turned the laptop so both Ji-woo and Min-jae could see clearly. You're not just running nightclubs and restaurants. According to these business filings, you're planning massive real estate development projects in Gangnam, Songdo, and Bisan. She pulled up architectural renderings and zoning documents, mixed-use commercial towers, luxury residential complexes, entertainment districts, projects worth hundreds of billions of won. She pointed to a highlighted section. And here's the key: you're competing directly with Gangnam Corporation for the same development contracts. 3 major projects, where you submitted lower bids with better designs. If your developments succeed, Gangnam doesn't just lose those contracts, they lose their dominant position in Seoul's commercial real estate market. So this isn't really about my family background or criminal allegations, Ji-woo said slowly, each word heavy with realization. It never was, Soo-min continued. They needed to destroy your credibility, freeze your assets, tie you up in legal battles so you couldn't compete for those development contracts. A murder trial accomplishes all of that. Min-jae leaned back, the pieces finally clicking together perfectly. That's why they didn't just try to outbid you or compete legitimately, he said. They needed to completely erase you from the competition. But there's more, Soo-min said, her expression darkening. I kept digging into Gangnam Corporation's connections. They have financial ties to 4 other major construction companies, to commercial banks, and ... She paused again, her voice dropping. 3 sitting members of the National Assembly's Construction and Transportation Committee. She pulled up more documents, campaign contribution records, photos from expensive fundraising dinners, records of overseas trips. They've built an entire network of influence, and when your development plans became public, they activated that whole network to destroy you. What about my lawyers? Ji-woo asked, her voice cracking slightly. How did they compromise Shin and partners? Still tracing those connections, Soo-min admitted, but the senior partner at Shin and Partners, attorney Shin Dong-jil, sits on the advisory board of Gangnam Financial Services, a subsidiary of Gangnam Corporation. The connection isn't obvious, but it's definitely there if you dig deep enough. Min-jae stood and began pacing the cramped cafe, his mind racing. So this isn't just a murder trial, he said. This is a coordinated campaign to clear the path for a trillion-won construction empire. And they won't stop, Ji-woo said, fear now clearly visible in her eyes. If they did this to you 16 years ago, if they can manipulate the system to this extent ... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. All 3 of them understood the danger perfectly. Soo-min's phone suddenly buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her face went completely pale. What is it? Min-jae asked immediately. It's from my company. They're saying my position has been eliminated, effective immediately. My belongings will be mailed to me. They fired you. Ji-woo asked, shocked. Officially, it's downsizing, Soo-min said bitterly. But the timing says everything. Min-jae placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, his expression filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Soo-min. I never wanted to drag you into this." Soo-min looked up at him, her eyes steady and determined. "You didn't drag me into anything, Dad. I chose this, and now that I'm in, I'm helping you fight all the way to the end." For the first time in years, Min-jae didn't see Soo-min as the child who'd lost her mother too young, or the young woman he'd missed so many moments with. He saw something else, an ally, a partner, someone as committed to justice as he was. "All right," he said, exhaling as if sealing an irrevocable decision. "Then we do this together." In the days that followed, the threats escalated from vague intimidation to clear, dangerous warnings that made Min-jae's stomach tighten every time he thought about them. His small Nawangu apartment was broken into. Nothing valuable was stolen. He owned nothing worth stealing, but everything was violently torn apart. The closet yanked open, drawers dumped across the floor, the thin mattress slashed with a long, deliberate cut. The message was unmistakable. "We know where you live." Soo-min's laptop was hacked. Fortunately, she'd backed up all critical data to an encrypted cloud server, but the fact that someone had intentionally breached her device and done it so obviously sent a chill through all of them. Then one night, as Ji-woo left her office late, a black Mercedes SUV ran a red light and accelerated directly toward her vehicle. Her driver swerved desperately at the last second. The car spun violently, crashing into a concrete barrier to avoid a head-on collision. Ji-woo escaped with only minor cuts and bruises, but the message was carved in stone: she was a target, and next time they might not miss. During an emergency meeting at Ji-woo's mansion the next morning, she said firmly, "You need to leave your apartment, Min-jae. Soo-min, you too. Both of you need to move here, where I have proper professional security. We can't stay separated like this. We can't just move into your home," Min-jae protested, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't want to be in your debt any more than I already am." "This isn't a favor," Ji-woo cut in, her voice sharp and decisive. "This is defensive strategy. They're attacking us individually, picking us off one by one. If we stay together with coordinated security, we're much safer." Soo-min placed a hand on her father's arm. "She's right, Dad. How am I supposed to work effectively if I'm constantly worried someone will break in every night?" Reluctantly, Min-jae agreed. That afternoon, they moved into the guest house on Ji-woo's estate, a separate building, smaller than the main mansion, but still vastly larger than anywhere Min-jae had lived in his entire life. While Soo-min excitedly explored the rooms, Min-jae remained in the living room, back straight, but hands unconsciously clenching and unclenching. The high ceilings, designer furniture, expensive artwork on the walls, all of it made him feel like an ink stain on a perfect white canvas. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the meticulously maintained garden. It was hard to believe that just 48 hours earlier, he'd been in an apartment barely large enough to turn around in. Ji-woo entered and stopped beside him. "You're uncomfortable," she observed without needing to ask. "I've lived 16 years in a tiny apartment," Min-jae said quietly. "This world, it isn't mine." Ji-woo stood silently beside him for a long moment, as if giving him time to breathe in this unfamiliar space. Then she spoke gently. "Maybe it should be your world. You have extraordinary talent and strength, Mr. Park. You could have been in a place like this, or far better, if they hadn't stolen everything from you." Min-jae turned toward her, and for the first time since they'd met in that courtroom, he truly looked at Ji-woo not as a client, not as an infamous mafia boss, but as a woman fighting for justice alongside him. Her black eyes, though tired, held something rare, genuine respect. "I don't need any of this," Min-jae replied, his voice firm. "I never did. I want justice. I want to help people who have no voice in the system. And after all these years, I finally have a chance to do that again. By helping me," Ji-woo said softly, "by fighting those who believe money and power place them above the law," Min-jae corrected. They stood in that wide, sunlit living room, afternoon light filtering gently through the enormous glass wall. The distance between their worlds, a janitor who used to be a lawyer, and the mafia boss trying to go legitimate was still there. But in that moment, it didn't feel as impossible as before. Something fundamental had shifted, not because of what they said, but because they were standing side by side, facing a common enemy, and in that silence, they both knew the real battle was only beginning. The next major breakthrough came from the most unexpected place imaginable. At 2:30 in the morning, Kang Min-ho Ji-woo's former head of security appeared at the mansion gate. His face was pale, clothes disheveled, hair blown wild as if he'd been running through the night. Security immediately alerted Ji-woo, who quickly woke Min-jae. They met Min-ho in a small room separate from the main house, a safety precaution in case this was an elaborate trap. Min-ho nearly collapsed when he saw Ji-woo, his usual military composure completely shattered. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry for everything." "For what?" Ji-woo demanded, her voice sharp as steel. Min-ho took a shuddering breath. "For everything. For copying those files, for passing information to them, for staying silent when I knew what they were planning to do to you." "Who is them?" Min-jae asked coldly. "Choi Jin-seok," Min-ho replied, his voice trembling. "The current leader of the Choi Syndicate. He came to me 7 months ago. He knew about my past." "What past?" Ji-woo asked. Min-ho looked down, unable to meet her eyes. 12 years ago, before I worked for you, I was involved in an illegal arms deal. Just once. I was desperate for money. My mother needed surgery. The deal went bad, but I got away. I thought it was buried forever. But Choi Jin-seok found evidence. Photos, transaction records, everything. "So he blackmailed you," Min-jae said darkly. Min-ho nodded, tears beginning to fall. "He told me if I didn't help him, he'd turn me in. I'd go to prison for a 15 years minimum. So I copied your security protocols, your business plans, your legal strategy. I planted false evidence to make it look like you'd ordered the hit on Park Tae-min. I fabricated witness statements. You created the entire case against me," Ji-woo said, her tone flat, but with a trace of deep hurt. "I did," Min-ho choked out, "and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life." "Then why come here now?" Min-jae asked, studying him carefully. "Why risk everything?" Min-ho pulled out a phone, not his personal one, but an expensive model that seemed completely out of place. Min-jae recognized it immediately as a burner phone used by criminals to avoid surveillance. "Tonight," Min-ho said, his hands shaking, "I overheard Choi Jin-seok on a call. He was talking about a permanent solution if the legal approach failed." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "They were discussing killing you, Ji-woo. Not just ruining you legally, actual murder. And they were planning to frame Min-jae for it." The room went ice cold. "I know what I did was unforgivable," Min-ho continued, voice cracking. "I know I betrayed you after you gave me a second chance. But I can't live with murder. I won't be part of that." He handed the phone to Min-jae. "This is Choi Jin-seok's private phone. I took it from his office tonight. It has everything: messages, emails, recorded calls, documenting the entire conspiracy." Min-jae took the phone, feeling as if he were holding a live grenade. "This could end the case," he said quietly. "Or end us, if they realize he took it." Soo-min said from the doorway. She'd arrived silently. "They'll know immediately. Choi will notice the phone missing by morning," Min-ho whispered. "If not sooner. That's why I came straight here." Ji-woo stared at Min-ho for what felt like an eternity. This man had been by her side for 6 years through dangerous confrontations, business negotiations, sleepless nights. And he was the one who had stabbed her in the back. But in those tear-filled eyes, she saw not just fear. She saw genuine remorse, deep and real. "You risked your life to come here," Ji-woo said, her voice softening slightly. "I owe you far more than that," Min-ho replied, trembling. "You gave me a job when no one else would. You trusted me with your safety. And I betrayed all of that. This is the absolute least I can do." Min-jae didn't hesitate. "We need to copy every piece of data on this phone immediately. Soo-min, can you do it?" "Give me 20 minutes, Soo-min said, already opening her laptop with practiced efficiency. While Soo-min worked, Min-jae asked Min-ho, "You know they'll come looking for you, right? You understand what that means?" Min-ho nodded slowly. "I know. You need to disappear," Min-jae said firmly. "At least until this case is completely finished. I have a cousin in Japan," Min-ho said. "I can go there tonight." "Go now," Min-jae ordered. "Don't go home. Don't pack anything. Go directly to the airport." 25 minutes later, all the data had been safely backed up onto Soo-min's encrypted server. In the darkness before dawn, Min-ho left in a taxi. Never looking back, Min-jae watched until the taillights vanished, wondering if they'd been right to trust him, wondering if he would survive what came next. Ji-woo stood beside him, her voice soft but steady. "He truly is sorry. Sorry doesn't erase the damage," Min-jae said bluntly. "No," Ji-woo agreed, "but courage can redeem it. He knew they would retaliate. And he still came here to warn us." Min-jae drew a long, deep breath, his jaw tightening with iron determination. "Now we have to use what he gave us. And we need to move fast. Because once they realize we have this evidence, ... He looked down at the phone in his hand. Solid proof of a massive criminal conspiracy. "They'll come at us with absolutely everything they have." They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, as Min-jae, Soo-min, and Ji-woo were reviewing every piece of damning evidence on Choi Jin-seok's phone, the estate's security alarms suddenly screamed through the intercom system. "Breach at the main gate," the security director reported urgently. "Multiple armed individuals. This is not a drill." Ji-woo jumped to her feet. "Lock down the entire property immediately. Call the police now." But as the security camera feeds switched between angles, the truth became unmistakable. 8 men in tactical black uniforms, fully equipped with military-grade weapons, moving through the estate grounds with the deadly precision of trained operatives. These weren't amateurs. These were professionals. "They're not police," Min-jae said, his voice dropping. "Mercenaries," said Park Sang-woo, the head of security and former special forces operator. "Ex-military or private contractors. They know exactly what they're doing." "We have to get out," Soo-min said, panic rising in her voice. But the cameras showed to more vehicles blocking the rear exit. No escape route remained. Sang-woo made a decision immediately. "Safe room. Move now." He led them through the mansion, down to the basement level, unlocking a reinforced steel door hidden behind a decorative wine cabinet. Inside was a compact panic room, concrete walls, reinforced with steel, multiple surveillance monitors, emergency supplies, and a direct hardline to emergency services. "You'll be safe in here," Sang-woo said firmly. "This door can withstand explosive charges. My team and I will hold them off as long as possible." "How long until police arrive?" Ji-woo asked. "Earliest estimate is 18 minutes. Sang-woo replied. "We just need to survive 18 minutes. The door shut behind them with a cold, final metallic clang. Inside the panic room, the three of them stared at the surveillance monitors as the nightmare unfolded in real time. The mercenaries moved like deadly shadows, silent, methodical, each step precisely calculated. Sang-woo and his 4 security guards were already in defensive positions, using every corridor and blind spot they could find. They fought bravely, using superior knowledge of the building layout. But the attackers were professionals, moving with flawless tactical formation. 1 guard fell. 1 mercenary went down. But the attackers kept advancing relentlessly. "They're heading directly for the basement," Min-jae observed, his stomach tightening. "They know we're here," Ji-woo said, her face draining of color. Min-ho must have told them about the safe room. Or they had complete floor plans from the beginning, Soo-min said quickly. "Either way, they know exactly where we are." Min-jae looked around desperately. 1 door, no windows, no backup exit, no weapons. They were trapped inside a metal coffin, waiting to be pried open. On the monitor, a mercenary placed a device on the basement entrance door. The small package blinked with red LED lights, unmistakably an explosive charge. "They're planting explosives," Soo-min said, terror rising in her voice. Min-jae grabbed his phone and dialed emergency services. We're under armed attack at 247 Cheongdong-dong, Gangnam. Multiple armed assailants with military weapons and explosives. We need immediate tactical response. Nearest tactical unit is 4 minutes out, the operator said. Stay in the secure location. Do not engage. 4 minutes. But the explosive device would detonate in less than 1. Ji-woo squeezed Min-jae's hand tightly. If this is how it ends, it isn't. He cut her off firmly. We've come too far. We don't end like this. Just as the device began its final countdown sequence, blinking faster, an unexpected image flashed across multiple monitors. Police vehicles, then more police vehicles, then SWAT armored trucks, not just 1 or 2, but what looked like an entire tactical strike force pouring into the estate from every direction. The mercenaries saw it too. They immediately halted, exchanged rapid hand signals, then retreated with the same deadly efficiency they'd arrived with, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. The explosive device was left behind, still armed, but not yet triggered. They're running. Soo-min almost screamed in disbelief and relief. 12 minutes later, the SWAT team had secured the entire property, carefully disarmed the explosive device, and methodically cleared every building on the grounds. When the panic room door finally opened, Min-jae, Ji-woo, and Soo-min stepped out, faces pale, hands still trembling, but alive. A tall man in an NIS jacket was waiting, his badge partially visible on his belt. Special Agent Kwon Jae-hyun, National Intelligence Service. Miss Yoon, Mr. Park. I'm very glad you're all safe. How did you get here so fast? Ji-woo asked immediately, still trying to process what had just happened. We've been monitoring Choi Jin-seok and his criminal network for several months, Agent Kwon explained. When a taxi driver reported transporting a man matching Kang Min-ho's description, heading toward Incheon Airport acting extremely nervous, we knew something major was happening. We deployed a rapid response team immediately. Is Min-ho safe? Ji-woo asked softly. He's under protective custody, Kwon replied, and he's agreed to provide full testimony in exchange for reduced charges related to his own past crimes. Min-jae exhaled, years of accumulated tension hung from his chest all at once. So we have enough evidence to bring them down. More than enough, Agent Kwon replied, allowing himself a thin, controlled smile. We arrested Choi Jin-seok for Jangsan Corporation executives, including to board members, and 9 other accomplices within the last 2 hours. With the data from his phone, Min-ho's testimony, and this direct attack on your lives. He straightened, his voice becoming formal and decisive. They're going to prison for a very, very long time. The next morning, when Min-jae walked into the courtroom, the entire atmosphere had fundamentally changed. There were no longer curious stares treating him like some amusing novelty. What replaced them was quiet, genuine respect, even from the reporters who'd initially mocked him. The prosecution attorneys looked utterly drained, as though they'd just survived a catastrophic battle they knew they could never win. Judge Lee Seung-ho, specially assigned after the previous judge recused himself due to conflict of interest, struck his gavel to open the session. I'm aware there were extraordinary developments overnight, he said gravely. Prosecutor Lee Jae-seung rose slowly. His shoulders nearly collapsed in defeat. Your Honor, in light of the arrests made by the National Intelligence Service and the overwhelming evidence presented this morning, the prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against Miss Yoon Ji-woo with prejudice. The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes burst like continuous lightning. Min-jae remained seated, watching Prosecutor Lee with an unexpected sense of sympathy. He too had been merely a pawn in a game far larger and more corrupt than he could have possibly understood. The motion is granted, Judge Lee declared firmly. Miss Yoon, you are hereby cleared of all charges. Your assets will be unfrozen immediately. He paused, his eyes moving to Min-jae. And Mr. Park, this court has never witnessed such a remarkable demonstration of dedication to justice. You are deserving of every recognition that will follow. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Ji-woo turned to Min-jae, tears shimmering in her eyes. We did it. We actually won. You won. Min-jae said gently. You never gave up. Not even when everything looked completely hopeless. Soo-min wrapped her arms around both of them, breaking the solemn moment. No, she said firmly. We won. As a team. 2 months later, Min-jae stood outside a renovated building in Gangnam, looking up at the freshly mounted sign, Park and Park Law, Civil Rights and Social Justice. Soo-min stood beside him, holding a brand new law school textbook. After everything she'd witnessed during the trial, she'd enrolled in Seoul National University Law School, a decision born directly from the case that had changed all their lives. Do you think we can really make this work? Soo-min asked. We can, Min-jae said with quiet confidence. We already have our first 5 clients, all people who were turned away by other firms because they couldn't afford proper representation. Soo-min smiled. Thanks to the Yoon Foundation for Legal Justice. Ji-woo hadn't just founded the non-profit. With an initial 20 billion won contribution, she'd rallied support from business leaders across Korea who had followed the trial closely. Inspired by our fight against corruption, the foundation would sponsor civil rights cases throughout the country, ensuring that justice wasn't reserved only for those who could afford expensive lawyers. As they entered the still empty office space, Min-jae heard the familiar sound of heels on marble behind him. Ji-woo stood at the entrance, holding a bottle of expensive champagne, her warm smile filling the bare room. I thought we should celebrate properly, she said. Soo-min understood immediately, a knowing smile crossing her face. I'll go look for some glasses. That might take a while. She slipped away discreetly, leaving Min-jae and Ji-woo alone in the quiet office. They stood side by side in the unfinished space, wrapped in the peaceful aftermath of their storm. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the large windows, painting everything in warm gold. I never properly thanked you, Ji-woo said softly, for standing up that day, for believing in me when everyone else had turned their backs. There's nothing to thank, Min-jae replied. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever: purpose, a reason to be myself again. Over the past 2 months, through investigations, press conferences, and establishing the foundation together, something profound had shifted between them. It had begun as mutual respect, evolved into genuine friendship, and now, standing here in the gentle afternoon light, it had become something deeper, something neither of them had expected to find. Min-jae, she said, using his given name for the very first time. I know we come from completely different worlds. I know people will talk, will judge us, but I've realized something important. The only thing that truly matters. What is it? He asked quietly. That the opinions of others don't matter. What matters is finding someone who truly understands you, who stands beside you through everything, and who makes you want to be a better version of yourself. She paused, then continued in a whisper. And I found that person. Min-jae's heart stopped. Since Hae-jin's death 17 years ago, he had never once allowed himself to love again. He'd buried the grief, buried the hope, buried the very idea that he deserved another chance at happiness. But Ji-woo, who had seen past the janitor's uniform and past all the scars, had somehow broken through every wall he'd built. I live a completely different life, Min-jae said softly. I have nothing compared to your world. You have integrity, Ji-woo interrupted gently, and courage, and kindness, and a heart that knows how to fight for what's right. I had money and success and power. What I didn't have was someone who saw me as a human being, not just as a means to an end. Min-jae looked down at their hands, one soft and carefully maintained, one roughened by years of manual labor, different, yet fitting together with impossible, perfect ease. Hae-jin was the love of my youth, he said quietly. I thought that part of my life was over forever. But, Ji-woo asked, her voice barely more than a breath. But maybe, he said slowly, we're given more than one chance at happiness, if we're brave enough to take it. They stood there in a silence so gentle, it felt like the world had paused just for them. Then Min-jae leaned in, slow and careful and tender. The kiss was a promise from 2 people who had been broken, who had lost so much, yet still found the courage to hope again. Soo-min's voice suddenly echoed from the back room, breaking the moment. I can't find any proper glasses. We might have to buy some. Min-jae and Ji-woo burst into warm laughter, the private moment dissolving into comfortable ease. I'd like that very much, Min-jae said. Before stepping through the doorway, he paused one last time, looking back at the sign, Park and Park Law, Civil Rights and Social Justice, a new beginning. And if this story of perseverance and justice moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to K-Mafia Stories, so you won't miss the next extraordinary tale about ordinary people doing extraordinary things.